Welcome to The Scoop. I am Farah,
And I'm Nicole.
and we are here to talk about communication. Look it
I
is
love
one.
yours.
Yeah. Oh, whoops.
And mine is your words matter.
Your words, man. I can't see the bottom. What is the bottom? Is
Oh.
it all? Oh, there it is. Yeah. Yes, and mine says all behavior is communication. So we will get into that and what does that mean exactly? I did look up some stuff just to kind of see that you can go real deep because sociology and psychology has a lot of stuff on that. I do remember back in my day when I was going for my social and psych degrees, I do remember some of the pyramid of communication. So that was interesting when I was looking that up. They had like a pyramid thing. But anyway, this is one of Sonnenberg's values is communication. That's what we're doing is going over all of our values. So that's one of them. So where does this rate for you, Nicole, on the values? Like, where would you say out of all of our values, you would put this one?
Hmm, that's tough.
I like
Um,
a whole.
I put it close to like the center of all of them.
It kind of ties in, right? It's like a
Yeah.
web, and it
Mhm.
goes out to all of them. Because
Yeah.
without it, you really can't have any of the other ones, really. Because communication, like it says right on my shirt, it's everything's communication. So it's not even, I mean, I think people think like, oh, you talk, like, hi, Nicole, that's communication, right? Or what'd you do this weekend? That's communication. I think that's like the typical kind of what people think of when you think of communication. But it's so much more than that. There's so many different ways to communicate. Even if you've lost all of your language or don't have language, verbal language, there's so much you can do. And we know that, right? No matter what you do, you hit somebody, that's a way to communicate. You run away, you scream, you get rosy cheeks because you're embarrassed or not feeling well, that's communication. Because you might walk in and say, like, what's up, Vera? Like, you don't look so good, or you just look at me and you don't say anything at all, right? And you know that there's a way of communicating, there's a way that I'm communicating. Um, so should we start from like a definition standpoint? What's your definition of communication?
Sure. Um, I think that communication happens across like many modalities. So there's written communication, there's vocal verbal communication, there's voice output communication, there's body language and things of that nature. And then I think it's also about like key components of communication, including like active listening, empathy, clear expression, um, all your nonverbal cues, those kind of pieces.
Yeah, I like that. I know that one of the things that we really value about Sonnenberg and everybody that's a team with Sonnenberg or on the Sonnenberg team is that everybody communicates a little bit differently, and what that looks like. And, that brings into, because we talk about nonverbal or NVC or compassionate communication. And we have like a skeleton of like, okay, this is compassionate communication, but the way that everybody kind of follows that looks a little bit different. And that also is based off of our past, our triggers and our biases and those kind of things too, because that can shut us down, that can make us push back, avoid all of those different things. And those are all forms of communication too. And communication can be like you or I are talking right now, and then all of a sudden I could say something that you go and you shut down or you start to speak up. um, that all is, I think, really important in the way that we connect because we either do or we don't, or we might. kind of be sometimes at almost a kind of standstill because we're not quite sure how to communicate from the past or something that somebody may say or do or you've heard or what have you. So I think that's also important and why I really value different definitions because it really is just a process, communication that can really involve a lot of steps. When I was kind of reading and just looking up way people described how they communicate, I think one thing that we all do is there's just a lot of steps sometimes to communication. So even me thinking, okay, we're going to talk about communication today. I'm going to get my shirt out. I had to, those are a lot of steps. I had to think about that. And then I had to go get my shirt. Oh, I had to make sure it was washed because I did wear it the other day. So then I washed it. And then I'm like, okay, now I got to go do this and I got to come back to get all ready just to wear this shirt. So I think of like, it's a process too, right?
Mhm.
Which I didn't really think about completely before. What do you think about that? Do you think communication is a process, or what does that look like, as far as steps and, um, with compassionate communication too, because we obviously talk about that a lot.
I think it is steps because it's also bi-directional. So you're to communicate
Like that.
to yourself, yes, I guess you can. And then to communicate to another person is some back and forth. It is like understanding, gathering perspective, making sure that there's clear expression there, things like that, valuing each other's time and how that communication is going, things like that.
So would you say you said it, okay, so it's an exchange between parties, two people, a group, something like that. So one thing that I was reading is it's inherently like social communication is a part of socializing. So when we talk about our clientele, that we're, involved at Sonnenberg with, is that why when we talk about social communication and there being something that we need to kind of help and guide the population that we work with, that's why that's one of the areas that everybody focuses on because it is inherently social, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things that, which again, we break down into a process, steps.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really important and why communication hits every area that we work on because it's all steps. It's all how do we get from A to B, and why, like, okay, let's think of an example. I hit you. Why is that a form of communication, right? Like, why is it? Well, because it worked. It worked before. I hit you. I hit Nicole because I didn't want to do that task. I didn't want to, sit down. I didn't want to give a high five. I didn't want to look at you. I didn't even want to go in that building, right? Those
Mm-hmm.
are all forms of communication by, whatever it is that I mean, there's lots of positive stuff too. That's just one that I think it's looked past with a lot of people when we first bring on new staff or we talk to families or even, our kids. That's all an expression. Just like if you have an outgoing kid, meaning they're smiley, they're engaged, and all of a sudden they're not, that's a big form of communication. We know that because that's not even with staff, right? Their behavior is consistent as far as they're on time, they come in and they, engage, and all of a sudden they stop showing up. That's communication. We know something's up. So I think those are all really important things because again, verbal, like us going back and forth, is kind of the common one that everybody thinks of with communication. What are some other things that you can think of, Nicole, that you think would be important to talk about, especially for staff and teammates?
Yeah, although communication with respect is one of our core values amongst each other, it also and when we talk about it like that, we talk about it with purpose of connection to other people. Um, And it's the same way with our clientele, because we are teaching a lot of communication and language, especially as that relates to like verbal behavior and how you teach language and how you build on those skills. A lot of times that also includes motivation. So what is going to like motivate you to communicate? So when you look at like manding or like requesting, then I'm asking for something, and I'm going to keep asking for that thing because now I'm receiving that. So there's motivation behind there. There's also social motivation. So wanting to connect with people, wanting to have peers, friends, maybe wanting to be involved in a game or something that's an event that's going on, an activity. There's communication within there too, which can your motivation can increase to communicate more, um, or less. But like you said, not engaging in vocal verbal communication is also communication when you stop that, um, what you once were doing. And that tells us something's up.
Yeah, and I'm always even more interested in that when something changes. I think silence or just change in your behavior and in the way that you're describing is, I think, almost more impactful on me because it's a huge change in like that sequence of steps that normally is occurring. So I'm very sensitive to that. So when something changes like that, I'll probably look into it more than I should because I'm like, wait a minute, that's not typical. And that looks different. So that's why I think I am sensitive to those pieces. I also think it's interesting because we do communicate with ourselves
Mm-hmm.
um, a lot, and this goes into the more social psych stuff. But there's interpersonal, which is two or more people, and then there's intrapersonal, which is yourself, which I think is fascinating because we communicate with ourselves constantly. And sometimes that can be good, and sometimes that can not be so good because we can be really rough on ourselves too, or tough, or negative, or what have you. So that's interesting to me, of how that reflects onto other people too, by how you're feeling, and how you're communicating with yourself, and vice versa, but for sure with that. Have you ever thought about that as far as the communication with yourself and how that affects your communication with others based off of how you're feeling or anxiety, or what do you think, Nicole?
Yeah. I mean, the more that we talk about this, the more I'm thinking about all the times that I do communicate with myself and how I actually find it annoying and wish that there could be some peace in my brain. And I understand why people may meditate or try to slow some of those thoughts, and be more present because those thoughts can also interfere with our output of communication and our relationships with other people, and what that looks like. So I don't know. I think that it is important to have self communication or like self reflection or identify with yourself, and understanding triggers and signals that you hold, so that you can create a framework of present moment awareness and look for those connections without all the kind of mumble jumble that's going on. It's never going to stop. It's just that you can set it aside or you can teach yourself to let it be there and still continue on with what's going on around you.
Yeah, the self-reflection, that's what it is. Essentially, a big piece of that. I like how you kind of were saying, like, because like I will ruminate on thoughts. So I'll replay thoughts, or conversations, or I'm a person that has to kind of listen to everything, and then I have to sit on it for, it could be hours, it could be a day, whatever. Like I have to think about what was just said. I don't know, it's just the way I process things. So it's interesting because I do have to stop myself from replaying it. It's almost like Groundhog's Day because then I'll like ruminate on that and think and start thinking too much. So I literally have to stop myself and be like, okay, so you're done. Shut down your mind because my mind doesn't shut down. That's the bad part of how I process things because then you don't sleep or you think about things. So that's like the self communication, the self-reflection that you have to get to know yourself with is what is like a healthy and because self-reflection is great, right? But then it's you got to move on too. So I think that's interesting. Because we are hardest probably on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I would think almost anybody would say that. Um, so yeah, I think that's super interesting. Because this is kind of brings up the sociology more like pyramid, and they do like society, what communication of society, how that reflects practices and institutions,
Mm-hmm.
which is very interesting. Because think about like politics and how that trickles down and how that affects businesses and communities and what people say or don't say. So I think that's a huge form of communication that isn't directly like Nicole, da, 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 or Farah, but it really directs that in institutions and then groups. And then we have talked about in the past too with clicks, which comes with a negative connotation, but it isn't really. It's just society kind of made it like that. Um, and that's right. Isn't that kind of what we decided? Like click has more of
Mm-hmm.
a negative, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so that those are forms of communication, right? You walk in, there's a group there or a clique or whatever you want to say, and you're like, whoa, there's some major stuff going on, and nothing even has even been discussed. So again, that's very interesting to me too. And then how you go to yourself based off of your environment and kind of what's happening too. So there's just so much you really could get into so many different areas, which is why I really loved sociology and psychology because I love the study of groups and I love the study of humans. Like, okay, what's that person doing over there? What's going on over there? Like, it's ridiculous. So, do you like doing that or does it, or no? Do you like, nah, I don't really want anything to do with that?
Mm. It depends what like frame of mind I'm in, honestly. It depends on, I guess, like the context or what's going on for me at that time because in order for me to like see what's in front of me, I have to be like present. And so it depends on what other things are going on.
That's true. You do have to be present, otherwise you miss it.
Yeah, right.
And that's a really good statement actually, because there's times where I could be with my family and they're like, "You didn't see that?" And I'm like, "No," as I was totally thinking about
Mhm.
something else. So I would imagine that's how it is. Yeah, that makes sense. I also think control versus not having control. So like talk about work.
Mhm.
And let's say you're working with in a scenario and you have a client and you're very present in that moment but it's very structured. So like here's what we're doing and let's say you're supervising, so there's kind of an agenda and this is how it goes. So that might look very different than walking in and it's not so controlled, right? 'Cause
Mhm.
that's the part that I think some people can struggle with too. They're very good with the kids, and then with other staff, it's a totally different story, or in other groups, or changing rooms. Uh-oh, this is new. I got it. There's a lot of nonverbal communication going on because you're trying to figure out what's going on in that room because it looks different. Um, yeah. And then one thing I wanted to ask you too, because we're kind of working on this right now, with communication with respect, and we're doing some like parent collaboration and training on those kind of things.
Mhm.
So, communication with respect, um, does that limit us to some communication? Because
Mhm.
it has to be respectful. And what does respectful mean? Um, What's that definition? And or does that push us into MVC or compassionate communication? Does that push us into the pause because we say respect? I'm curious your outlook on that.
Yeah, I think that respect is a very subjective term, and respect looks different to me than it would to you or than it would to the next person, which is also why communication is so important. And I do think that when you say communication with respect, it does limit us a little bit because there's a difference between what respect is. Um, and in order to have maybe it's more about like open communication to identify the perspectives of others, because then you would be able to gather, like if you went into a conversation with an open mind,
Mhm.
then and with the purpose of connecting and understanding, then you would go into a conversation and want to know maybe what respect means to that other person and be able to share that your perspective and actively listen to their perspective,
Mhm.
which actually would extend communication, which does go into our NVC pieces because that is the purpose of it is connection, and connection means to also continue that communication and not end the communication, because when you end the communication and you kind of go your separate ways, was there was there active listening, was there empathy, was there, like, did you get to that person's needs, feelings, did I get to my own needs and feelings, did I was I able to make requests with intention to move forward and come back together at some point in time. So putting all those pieces together in one.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting and something to keep talking about because the definitions are different and the way that I view respect and the way you view respect and everybody else, I think could be very different. Like I think of Jason, my husband and how he looks at respect, and there's times where I've been like, well, that was disrespectful, and he's like, why? They were just feeling what they were feeling, and it wasn't directed towards you. Like, but they got louder and they swore. He goes, but it wasn't like they swore at us. It was just they were frustrated. And when you shut that down, people won't aren't you glad that would you rather know that than have them shut down and not it's just interesting because again, like we're very different, Jason and I, and how we communicate as far as like not a lot bothers him, with that. He'd rather talk to somebody upset and get it all out and than them not say anything and never have the conversation. So it's interesting. That's where I always am like, I don't know. What does that mean? Again, values and definitions of some of the things how we describe. So it'll be interesting to hear staff for here in our value video of communication, what other staff say.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know that we do that. So yeah, I think it's a great way to kind of look forward. And what I love about us, with our growth mindset of are we getting everything with this value? So,
Yeah.
because we do want it to be bi-directional. And so does that tube of connection get clogged if we put um, you know, boundaries on what that communication looks like? Some talk about maybe in seat.
I mean, yeah, I think that as far as caregivers too, because we have all of our values, that caregivers acknowledge that they abide by our core values as well. And so when you think about a caregiver, and myself as a parent who has a child that displays high magnitude interfering behaviors, um, it it there's going to be times that maybe I'm not communicating with respect because I'm frustrated or it was a bad day, or and I think I would want grace for that. And so where does grace come from then in communicating with a caregiver who is upset, who is frustrated? Like, are you going to say, because you're not communicating with respect, that we're no longer going to have this conversation? Because then the conversation ends there and nothing really comes of that. And I think it breaks trust in a way, to end it like that. Um, and so there's just different things to think about as far as that, like, and what you're, and it kind of goes into boundaries too, what you allow and what you don't. Because I really wouldn't mind if a caregiver was upset. That wouldn't really bother me. I mean, if they're like swear, like calling me names and like swearing at me, and like because of my character, like maybe I would be upset. But if they're upset or frustrated, like that's kind of stuff doesn't bother me.
Yeah. I don't think when it comes to um our families or the caregivers that, we're interacting with, it would take a lot for me. I
Yeah.
actually am very motivated by families that are expressive because I think they tell more, they say more and they're very like you don't have to ever think about what they're feeling really. And you don't want to shut that down and have them go because what happens well, it's not as much in clinic, but in home for sure it happened that if you didn't stay open and that they would go to the tax. And then the tax, because the tax are already there with the parents more in the home. And a lot of times they're the ones that are bringing out to the car, so they get more communication, with the even clinic based. So I don't know. I want to make sure that they're coming to me when they're the family that I'm, working with. So it's just very interesting. I think that's something that we can definitely keep diving into to make sure that we're having that back and forth. Not that I want screaming, yelling, swearing. That's not what I want. Um, but I think that's easier to get to some of the needs too, of why
Yeah.
that might be occurring.
I think some of the tools that we have learned and talked about thus far also put us in a place to be able to handle something that demonstrates as conflict and to be able to like work through that. Um, and not that I welcome conflict all the time. However, we do have the tools to get through it. And to get out on the other side. And sometimes that allows us to have even more of a connection or more trust, or because we've had those difficult conversations with one another.
For sure. Um, and we're their lifeline. And there's families that don't leave their home except to drop off their kid or to, they don't go to functions. They don't go out in public because they have, their child's displays, they would take off. They would hit someone. I mean, name it. I think it's 25% of families are in the severe, like they don't leave their home. And I know several of them, because see, there's always stuff going on with the administration now, the political administration versus the last, and there's a lot of conflict there. And there's a 25%, that 25% of the families are pissed because they have been silenced. These are words of the families of like, we don't leave our home. Well, I'm not happy that my child is autistic. I love my child's. I love everything about my child's, as far as them, but I want help. I need change. We're like, we can't leave our home, So it's just the reason I bring that up is because that's a form of communication of like help. And I'm frustrated, and I want to hear those families. I want to know what's going on. Like what is going on? I remember Nicole. Remember back when there was a client. I don't know if they how much we did. I don't know that. Yeah, we did because we were with him a year. Remember the man that was in his house for was it years and wouldn't leave his house, hadn't showered. Well, it was in Racine, and it was like I can't remember all of the situation, but there was somebody stuck in, and they hadn't left in years and years. They had not like the client, and it was an adult man. I don't think he had showered in a year either. Those are like huge forms of communication and huge forms of like help me. And that family was so frustrated and so like I can't do anything. I can't do anything. So they were frustrated. They cried, they screamed, not at us, but um how important was that? If
Mhm.
somebody had been like, that's just, I can't listen to that person because they're out of control. It wasn't about us. It was about them and survival, is
Yep.
my point in all of that. Sometimes it's just survival. Um, so yeah, I like all that. And I think that that's one thing that we really value is, one of our other values is the equitable, like we want to help as many people as we can and not just pigeonhole to you talk like this, you do this, you're 4 years old, that's it. 3 years old. Oh, now you're too old. Oh, now you're too this, right? So those are all kind of statements too, I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah.
So, well, cool. That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
A lot to think about. I always get so much out of this to think about what we can do to move forward and communicate with each other and with you know, our staff and leadership. So yeah. All right. Anything else, Nicole, that you wanted to talk about?
No, it is a lot to think about though.
It is. I like now I already have some plans in my head that
Yeah.
I want to bring up tonight.
Yep.
So, well, thank you everybody for this episode, and we will see you next time. Bye.